The UN are rushing to impose a new global carbon tax on shipping, potentially adding hundreds of thousands of dollars in carbon taxes to every journey of every container or cargo ship anywhere in the world, which means billions in annual revenue for them and higher cost of living and lower living standards for us. Some of you may starve, but that's a price we're willing to pay. This new net zero framework from the International Maritime Organisation is literally a protection racket. It is global organised crime, collusion, racketeering in its most literal form, where countries will commit to imposing punitive costs on shipping operators and will then collude to exclude and punish countries or shipping operators who refuse to pay the protection money. Pay to play. Globalists are now rushing to create their dream new world order before it all falls apart. 5 years ago, as the world went into lockdown and wokeness was still on the rise with all of its ESG and DEI nonsense, these globalists thought that the future was theirs and nothing could stand in their way. But the pendulum reached its zenith, the worm of history turned, and we are now in the middle of the next great cultural revolution and the world is turning the other way. Now these globalists are racing the clock because of rapidly growing global awareness of their plans and a fast-rising opposition at a grassroots level, and also increasing boldness in the body politic of the UK thanks to reform, with the latest polls looking absolutely fantastic for them, and of course the boldness we're seeing in the US thanks to Trump. More on that in a minute because that is very relevant to this story. And perhaps soon we might even start to see some boldness in Australia, thanks to the growing rejection of net zero here, with the membership of the Liberal National Party rejecting it almost nationwide, and now there is a serious push from some fantastic MPs to reject net zero as LNP policy. These next few years are the reckoning. It's the colliding, the showdown between the globalist hopes and dreams of turning the planet into an open-air prison for them to rule as they see fit, versus our determination to be free, whether they like it or not. So expect the next few years to feel a bit like the movie called Disaster Movie, where there's disasters everywhere, but ironically the movie itself turns out to be the biggest disaster of all. 1.9 stars out of 10. It's gotta hurt. Likewise, if we allow these globalists to force their disastrous policies onto us all, it is absolutely going to be a disaster for us all. Worse than 1.9 stars out of 10. Ask the people of Venezuela how an almighty benevolent dictatorship is working out for them. 1.9 stars would be generous. If they could leave a review, it would be something like, "Tried socialism, I starved to death. 0 stars, would not recommend." Thing is, the UN and all their globalist buddies at the World Health Organization, the World Economic Forum, and now the International Maritime Organization, they know that they only have a few years left, if that, to get their dream digital prison made up of digital ID, relentless surveillance, and complete control via a carbon tracking social credit system with digital money into place, or else the pushback will have grown to the point where it will be impossible, and the window of opportunity will be closed, at least for the remainder of their lifetimes. We are in the fight of our lives in these next few years, and make no mistake, this latest push for a global carbon tax from the International Maritime Organisation is just one fight out of many that we have to tackle, and we have to win. So, what are they doing and how do we stop them? I'll get to that in a second, but first, my name's Topher Field. This is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to keep up with the world as it changes around us, and to make sense of the nonsense that we're fed by the media and our politicians. I am 100% viewer supported. So please help me to keep the Topher Project going by buying me a coffee via the button at topherfield.net, and check out my books, DVDs, and merch at goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. Under these now ratified regulations, shipping operators will have to comply with 2 things. Global Fuel Standard. Ships must reduce over time their annual greenhouse gas fuel intensity, GFI. That is, how much greenhouse gas is emitted for each unit of energy used. This is calculated using a well-to-wake approach and global economic measure. Ships emitting above GFI thresholds will have to require remedial units to balance its emissions, while those using zero or near-zero GHG technologies will be eligible for financial rewards. To put that bunch of gobbledygook into plain English, we're talking about carbon quotas with a carbon tax and trade scheme, i.e., the exact thing that globalists have wanted for decades. Witness former US Vice President Al Gore and his enthusiasm for carbon trading, along with his business partner David Blood. Yeah, they're called Blood and Gore, and no, I'm not making this up, you can Google it. They've made a killing, pun fully intended, pushing carbon cap and trade schemes and profiting off them handsomely to fund their very carbon-intensive lifestyles. Such carbon schemes have had limited success within countries, so now the International Maritime Organisation is taking a new approach. What if they tried to impose the carbon tax in between the countries, i.e., on the open seas? US President Trump is completely opposed, staying true to his America First commitment and calling into question once again the relevance of the UN without the support of the world's largest economic, diplomatic and military superpower. US Secretaries of State, Energy and Transportation have issued a joint statement. President Trump has made it clear that the United States will not accept any international environmental agreement that unduly or unfairly burdens the United States or harms the interests of the American people. Next week, members of the IMO will vote on the adoption of a so-called NZF, aimed at reducing global carbon dioxide gas emissions from the international shipping sector. This will be the first time that a UN organisation levies a global carbon tax on the world. The administration unequivocally rejects this proposal before the IMO and will not tolerate any action that increases costs for our citizens, energy providers, shipping companies and their customers or tourists. The economic impacts from this measure could be disastrous, with some estimates forecasting global shipping costs increasing as much as 10% or more. We ask you to join us in rejecting adoption of the NZF at the October meeting and to work together in our collective economy and energy security. The NZF proposal proposes significant risks to the global economy and subjects not just Americans but all IMO member states to an unsanctioned global tax regime that levels punitive and regressive financial penalties. Well, that motion has now passed, and predictably Anthony Albanese's government absolutely loved it. Because of course they do. I've spoken at length in past episodes about how modern prime ministers and premiers no longer view being the leader of a state or country as the pinnacle of their careers. They view it as a stepping stone on to bigger and better things in the UN, World Economic Forum, or other globalist bodies. That's why they so consistently and enthusiastically support these sorts of globalist schemes, even though they are bad for the people of Australia. The people who pay these politicians their salary, the people that these politicians supposedly serve. It's good for the politician's career post-politics to support this nonsense, and clearly that's all that matters. But the timing of this vote is a little bit awkward for Anthony Albanese, because he's due to meet with Donald Trump in just a few days' time. Now, we'll see if it actually happens or not, but if it does, it is going to be one of these in front of the press type meetings that Trump uses to give other world leaders a stern talking to. Remember Keir Starmer getting called out on freedom of speech in the UK in front of the world's press? How about Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who has a transgender kid, having to sit and listen to Trump denounce transgender ideology? Or who can forget the classic Trump calling out the South African president for the genocide against white South Africans, right there to his face in front of the world's waiting media? Good times. So given that Australia has supported the International Maritime Organisation in adding this new punitive tax to global shipping, and then barely 5 days later, Albanese is going to be sitting in front of Trump, hoping for concessions on tariffs against Australia, our steel and aluminium. Whilst at the same time, by the way, our e-safety Karen is picking a fight with US tech giants. Yeah, maybe Albo is going to get the meeting that he so desperately craves. But that doesn't mean that the meeting is going to go well. Back to this maritime carbon tax. Here's the catch that no one seems to be talking about yet. The US are still the world's largest consumer of goods and services and the world's largest economy by some margin. It is bigger than the EU. It is bigger than both the Chinese and Indian economies combined. If Trump refuses to agree to this new carbon tax, the IMO doesn't just miss out on those tax revenues, and the shipping companies don't just miss out on that tonnage. The countries that they were going to be shipping from will miss out on those exports. And sure, the US miss out on their imports too. But don't put it past President Trump to simply flip the negotiating table. He's not going to be bullied into paying a tax to a globalist body like the IMO. And if that means he has to upend global trade to force them to back down, don't bet against him. He's clearly willing to do that, such as with tariffs. So what happens now? Well, the detail is this. These new rules aren't due to come into effect until 2028. So probably not much will happen for a while, and that's a good thing because remember, the world is now moving away from these globalists and their mad power and cash grabs. And in 2028, 3 years' time, the next US presidential election will be in full swing, with presumably Vice President J.D. Vance as the frontrunner for the Republicans, or maybe Marco Rubio or Ron DeSantis, or maybe even A. Kennedy as a leading Republican candidate. And in that context, with a presidential election just around the corner, there is no way in hell that Trump is going to back down, and no way that any of the leading Republican candidates for the upcoming election will back down either. Now, at that point, we'll have to wait and see how the rest of the world responds, the ones who have signed up to this new global shipping carbon tax. Are they willing to cut off their nose to spite their face? In the meantime, expect that this new global carbon tax being imposed by the International Maritime Organisation is going to be yet another sore point between US President Donald Trump and Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. This is on top of all the other sore points, like our Karen targeting US tech companies, our ambassador being an undiplomatic prick, and Australia sucking up to globalists and to China. My name's Topher Field, this is the Topher Project, and I help busy people like you to keep up with the world as it changes around us. I am 100% viewer supported, so please help me to keep the Topher Project going by buying me a coffee via the button at topherfield.net. And if you like my videos, then you will love my books, DVDs, and merch, all of which you will find at goodpeoplebreakbadlaws.com. Thank you for watching to the end. Please like, comment, subscribe, and as always, think free.